and greetings. You are listening to another live broadcast of Voss Speaks, Building a New Legacy. And today we are a bit delayed just with some technological issues on this side, just navigating, bringing in our guest as joining us from Sierra Leone, West Africa, on this auspicious day of August 3rd, which represents the birth date of the Honorable Reverend Dr. Edward Wilmot Blyden, a stalwart of Pan Africanism, of African fundamentalism, of all things supporting African liberation, sovereignty, reparatory justice before it was called reparatory justice, reparations before it was called reparations, and truly bringing truth as power for African Black people globally, specifically with groundings in the Isle of St. Thomas when it was the Danish West Indies, which is now the Virgin Islands of the United States, and taking his message through the church, through community organizing, and much, much more, speaking more than 16 languages fluently, also traversing in Sierra Leone, Liberia, Kemet, Egypt, and many other places, and who is joining us tonight. Audio, just because we've been having some technological issues, is none other than his illustrious great granddaughter, Isa Blyden. Greetings, Sister Blyden. How are you?
Greetings to you. Thank you for having me.
It's a joy and a privilege. Please share with our audience because we know that our time has been somewhat uh, shortened, and we will work out some of the technological issues in the future so that they can see you, because it's important for persons to see you as well as hear you. But for tonight's broadcast, we would love for you to share a bit about your illustrious great grandfather, some highlights that you would like us to be aware of, and then we'll go into some other areas that are pivotal to some of the future activities coming forth. So please share.
Well, my great grandfather, Edward Wilmot Blyden, was born in the Virgin Islands in Charlotte, Amali. And his mother is actually the fundamental person to do with his early, literacy. Whatever literacy he had was through his mother, who taught him how to read using the Bible. At 18, he went, actually 17 and a half, he was taken to the United States to go and attend Rutgers Theological Seminary, but he was denied entrance on the basis of the fact that other African American students that had gone there had not done well, so he was denied entrance. So he was then given passage to go through the American Colonization Society and the New York Presbyterian Society, passage to travel to Liberia, which had just become a republic. And the reason why was because they were creating a school that they would name the Alexander High School, which was named after the founder of the Presbyterian Theological Seminary in Princeton. And so Blyden ends up, once the school gets started, which was a year or more, so that when he gets there, he's this young man of 18. He has really nowhere to go, but he ends up working in one of the benefactors' houses until that one disappears, and then he tutors in the Baptist church. He does a lot of small jobs. He writes for the newspaper. He really finds opportunities quickly. Mm-hmm. And then he was advised by one of his, one of the people, in fact, who brought them in there. He says, well, I'm all alone here, and I don't have a support or anything, What am I to do? He says, every opportunity that you have, you should seize, because you don't know whether that opportunity is going to take you to where you're going to go. Mm-hmm. And so he follows this man's advice. He literally seizes every opportunity that comes his way, and he begins to live in Liberia.
Excellent.
He does 2 years of high school at the Alexander High School. He graduates, and he then becomes the headmaster of the school. He has 7 students, and he's teaching them languages because he's taught himself how to read Hebrew. Mm-hmm. He's taught himself Latin, and he's taught himself Greek because he likes the classics. Mm-hmm. And he learns these, he teaches himself. And so that's what he teaches these young boys along with religious studies in the Alexander High School. Then comes that he has to take the divinity exam for the Presbyterian Church because that's why he's gone there. He passes, he's ordained in 1858, and he begins to preach in what is today called the First Presbyterian Church of Monrovia. But at that time, it was known as the First Cumberland Church, Presbyterian Church. It comes out of, I think, Maryland. And what's so interesting about it is when you go to this church, you will see his name on the plaques on the wall. I was fortunate when I went to Liberia finally to go discover, how did this man live there with my great, how did they live in Liberia? Because I'd really gone. And I wanted to also see what it would be like to work with a female president. Well, I go to the church, and the pulpit where he used to preach was still there. The chair he sat on was still there, so I sat on it. And then I went and looked at the plaques, and I took pictures. And the guy said, "Well, you are our mother now because he's not here. You're going to be the mother of this church." I said, "Okay." But to sit in my great-grandfather's chair, the one he sat in as the elder, was a very exciting moment. I thought, "Oh, for heaven's sakes." Well, they didn't like the pulpit because it was old, they said. So do you know they tore that pulpit down? They did not keep it. Something so valuable. I kept telling them, "Look, just keep it as a museum." I said, because people will come to see this. That's what people are looking for. They didn't listen. They knocked down that pulpit. But they didn't knock down the chairs. What they've done today is they've upholstered them so they have a new kind of material on it. But when I went there, it was the original velvet one that was there. It was really, really neat. Really neat. Okay, so then after he was a Presbyterian pastor, then the Liberia College opened. They opened the Liberia College. But they didn't have enough faculty. They had Alexander Crummell, who was a PhD from Cambridge University. He was an British African. And then there was Blyden, who was prolific in these languages, and he was already, a headmaster. So he was given a Master of Arts degree from Middlebury, so he could lecture. And he began to lecture at the Liberian College. All right. And so there he is. He's doing that. He's lecturing. He's a pastor. And he's writing for the newspaper. Because it's critical that he seizes every single opportunity that he can. Mm-hmm. All right. So that he can survive in Liberia, this place that he doesn't know. And it takes him into the countryside because the Presbyterians are weak compared to the other ones like the German missionaries or the Basel missionaries or the Baptist or say some of the United Methodists. They had more strongholds. Presbyterians were very conservative. They were the ones that were non-reformed ones, so they were very snooty and all that sort of thing. And Blyden and Cromwell were the African American ones. In those days they called them Negro, but I use the word African American. I don't use those terms because it's supposed to evolve and we're supposed to be new and improved. So okay, and so he goes into the interior where he meets the other tribes, and he tries to convert them to Presbyterianism, and he finds out that they're all Muslim. And because they're Muslim and the Muslims have had a stronghold, he can't convert them because they're really Muslim. So he decides to study why it is that the Arabs can get all these followers, but the Christians can't. And he finds out that it is because they adapt to the way of life of the different nationals that they meet in Liberia. The Mandingo, the Bassa, the Vai, all of these are different, and they all speak different languages, but they're practicing Islam. So Blyden does two things. He learns the languages of the people of Liberia, and he begins to study Islam and Arabic. In fact, he begins to study Arabic. He begins to teach himself Arabic so that he can then try to convert these Muslims to Christianity. Okay. Using their own language and Arabic. He has an interesting moment. He befriends these people. He learns their history. They treat him like this guest, and he interviews them, and he respects and this and that. He never converts to Islam at all, at no time. But he translates the Bible into Arabic, so that these imams can see that it's the same text. That it's not a different book altogether. That the Bible and the Quran are the same. Which is was a very brilliant sort of strategy on his part. And he did that secretly. He did it in Liberia, he did it in Guinea, and he did it in Sierra Leone. Mm-hmm. He really became passionate because he was trying to understand, why it was that these two important religions into African societies and communities were having such an effect. The Muslim one educated the African, but the Christians were snooty. They were snobbish. They didn't really educate them the way, say, the Muslims did. They built a church that was foreign. They talked down to them. They changed their names and all of that. And maybe the Muslims changed their names too, but the name sounding was similar. So it wasn't like there was a big traumatic thing to have, the name change. It was like an award put on. Okay, so he begins to study this country that it's in. It's going to be his country, right? And so for it to be his country, he has to know it. Mm-hmm. He's a lecturer in the university. Mm-hmm. There's the American Colonization Society that's trying to promote its goodwill of having the slaves from the South repatriate to Liberia, right, and settle. And so because Cromwell and Blyden are the two primetime poster children that they have, they send them back to America to lecture in the churches about Liberia and why they should come to Liberia. And in the course of their doing this, they first went in 1861. They went to Maine, they went to Maryland, Virginia, they went to Washington, D.C., they went to New York. And in all of these, wherever he did his sermon, one of the nice things is he wrote down the name of the church and the sermon and so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. But what they were successful in doing over, say, a period of what must have been, say, 5 years, was to get 8 shiploads of slaves emancipated to come and settle in Liberia, which was an achievement. Mm-hmm. So he stays there for 12 years first, and he decides he wants to go and see his mother. When he first asks that question, he's only been there 6 years. No, he hasn't stayed there long enough in the service of the Lord, so he has to wait. So after 12 years is when he goes back to the Virgin Islands, which is then called the Danish West Indies, to see his mother. And he's very excited about where he is. So when he goes there, he says hi to his mother. The neighborhood comes out to bring cakes and everything to welcome him. He's even allowed to preach in the church, which is a Dutch Reformed church, to preach in their church because his family is a member of this church, and he was christened there. And there he comes back 12 years later. He's a lecturer in the university. He's a pastor in a Presbyterian church. And so he tells them about Liberia in this church, and the community comes in the church because they had their segregation. Not so much segregation, but there was discrimination with the Dutch and Africans. Most African Americans, or most of them were free, but not all. Some still had with the in the Moravian sect. Okay. Right. So he preaches to them, but what really excites him about being there, and he can't wait to go and tell the other Caribbean islands about this wonderful place where he is. And he goes and he tells them about Liberia. He tells them about what it's like living there, how the people live, and how, if they come there to live, how they're going to have huge farms and plantations. They're going to be independent and wealthy. He talks up a storm. He takes a boat. They take him in a boat. He sails to Antigua. He sails to Bahamas and Barbados. Mm-hmm. But he can't get to Jamaica because it's too far. They come. He sends out flyers. So they come to the island. And he's giving lectures. The whole time he's there, he hardly sees his mother, who he's going to see, because he's busy trying to tell them, you've got to come. You have got to come there. Your life is going to change. This and that and the other. You know, the slaves from America, yeah, they're okay, but they're not like us. Mm-hmm. So he really, really inspires them. And as a result, it is because of Blyden that the Caribbean natives of Jamaica, Barbados, Bahamas, and Antigua, I think Antilles also, all repatriate to Liberia. It's a fact. Not from the American Colonization Society, no. They came there in the 1860s, like that, 1860s, like that, 1870s. They kept coming. And they did have plantations, and they did work hard. And what happened was they tended to have like a clique, like a kind of a, when you meet Caribbean islanders on the west coast of Africa or the east coast, they are a community by themselves. They work very well in the country where they are. They make significant changes, especially in the church, especially in skills, like training in skills and so on and so forth. The Jamaicans are they were the ones who came more in mass, because first there had been Jamaicans sent there because of the recapturing of slave ships and setting them free on Sierra Leone soil. Mm-hmm. So there was already Jamaicans in Sierra Leone, for example. Right. So the Liberians, the Jamaicans who came to Liberia were familiar. And so you'd have some transiting, leaving Liberia to go to Sierra Leone or vice versa, But anyway, they were very hardworking people. The only thing that is wrong with this whole story, and it was a problem that Blyden had a problem with, and that was the Liberian government, which was set up in 1847 as a republic. If you saw the first president, J.J. Roberts, you would say he was a blue-eyed Caucasian from, I don't know, there was nothing to say he was black. And all of them that served under him were his complexion. And they discriminated against the dark-skinned, repatriates. This began to be a problem. Blyden, Crummell, the pains, they began to have tensions. They began to resent because they were being discriminated against. They were not allowed to sit where they sat, or they couldn't have this. And then the Presbyterians, their missionaries who came in the same capacity as what Blyden and Crummell were doing, they were given houses complete with everything inside, whilst Blyden and Crummell were put in one little room and they had to have a partition. Both of them by then had married, and so they had their families in this little tight room outside of the Presbyterian church. They did not make provision. There was all of that kind of discrimination, but it did not deter them. That's the interesting part. It did not deter, not Blyden, not Crummell, and none of the ones that were the dark-skinned ones. They were the harder working ones. They were the ones who went out into the field. They were the ones who did the report. They were the ones who made the innovations.
Yes.
Right. The mulatto tended to discriminate. They were the American Liberians, and they had plantations. And they had servants, is that right? And that same kind of social mentality that was there in America, they brought it to Liberia. Blyden began to speak out, against this. Began to speak out against that kind of social discrimination. And how, it was unfair, and even the salaries were different. There was a lot of tension that went on. And so, at one time, the mulattoes got angry. I don't know, he criticized them in a speech or in a letter. And they dragged him up the hill to lynch him. He had a friend, and this friend ran alongside him as he was being dragged up the hill, Crown Hill it's called. It still stands, Crown Hill, with this rope around his neck. And this friend had his finger between the rope and Blyden's neck, which is why his neck did not snap. But then he had to leave Liberia, okay, because there was this anger. But but this is coming along. He even ran for the presidency of Liberia, and of course he did not win. He knew he wasn't going to win, because not for just the social discrimination of it, the politics tended to favor the mulatto. The Presbyterian whites who administered the missions, they too were partial, right, to the light skinned. Okay, they called themselves, as I said, Americo-Liberian. Blyden appealed to them in his sermons, in his inaugural addresses during Independence Day and at the university. Look, we are here as an independent republic, and we have a nation of people we have to rule. That's why we are called the Republic of Liberia. You cannot exclude 75% of your population and say that you're a nation, you're a republic. You have to be inclusive. Right. You cannot get ahead if you don't go in and find out who it is that are our subjects. You cannot exclude the native from your overall activities all the time, because nobody will believe then that you are an authentic republic. Right. And the people themselves will resent you, okay? Right. And so as a result, over and over, this was over and over. He had gone, he'd studied, he gave lectures about the different ethnic groups. He did a lot of things to try and get people to just go in and work with the Liberian ethnic groups that were there. They didn't listen. They kept on with this Americo-Liberian thing, the social crime, the mulatto, the this, the that, and the other, which is what led to the 25-year instability that later on afflicted Liberia in the 20th century. It was ugly. It was really ugly. I mean, Sierra Leone, yes, they had theirs too, but no. When I went there, I actually saw it. I literally saw it and witnessed it, and I thought to myself, oh, so this is what it is. And then when they saw me, and they said, oh, that's Blyden's granddaughter. Oh, she doesn't like mulattoes. That's they whispered that. And I thought, and I turned and smiled, and said hello, because I wasn't Liberian. I mean, I came from Sierra Leone. I had access to Liberian citizenship. And even now, for the bicentenary, which I'd like to also mention, is that I'm preparing to have for him, is so that the whole of West Africa can have a bicentenary. We don't have anybody that's had a bicentenary before. We haven't. It's not been like that. And he served in 8 countries in West Africa. Right. There's 17. He spoke the languages. He taught schools. He opened churches. He started newspapers in 3 of the colleges. Nigeria, which is a big country, his grandfather was from there, so he tried to sail down to the east of Nigeria to see if he could find his relative or anybody that looked like him, so he could say, well, oh, I found right. But sadly, he did not see any of his relatives. But he was very enthusiastic and intensely passionate and living on the West African coast. He had a lot of diverse skills. He had a lot of positions he tried to fill, and of course, when you're trying to fulfill a lot of positions and then you don't have enough time, or stamina, naturally you're going to flounder, it's not going to be complete, you're always going to have to go back, And so in 1887, he convinces the president then, is James Paine, to send him to represent Liberia as ambassador, because he thinks that Liberia is a republic and should represent in the world like every other country does. Right. They said no, because it's not possible. We're not ready. We don't have the money. So he says, well, let me go anyway. I don't have to get a salary. It's okay. Just send me there, and I will promote the country and like that. So he goes there without a salary. But what happens is an American, not millionaire, but a wealthy American who supports the embassy of Liberia and supports his mission there first. He promotes Liberia effectively. He meets the literary people because by then he's published. He's published three books. He's published his first book in 1859, entitled Liberia's Offering. His second book is From West Africa to Palestine, and his third book is Christianity, Islam, and the Negro Race.
If
So
I
by the
may,
time
if
he's
I may, though,
yes, ma'am.
I just want to highlight for those that are
Oh yes,
listening, joining us, that tonight is really an opportunity to hear and learn about the Honorable Reverend Dr. Edward Wilmot Blyden. He was born today, August 3rd, 1830.
I was gonna get there, but it's okay.
No, but that no, because I know that our time is
Okay.
going to expire, and I
Okay,
just want to
okay.
make sure that
Well,
I
let
cover.
me just pause there then.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay. I'm
because
pausing until
no, well, we're going to
Mhm.
come back and do this again, and that way we can also have you before we close tonight share about the bicentenary and so forth. But I just wanted to highlight.
No, I was not going to mention bicentennial. I meant that in passing, but when I said he was raised by his mother, I forgot to tell you what year he was born and what the date, the August
No
30th,
worries.
his birthday, which
No
we're
worries.
celebrating.
Yeah, no worries. But I just wanted
So
to.
we stopped.
Yeah, but before you continue, just let me just share with those that because
Yes.
persons are coming in because they thought we were coming on
Okay.
earlier, so they're coming in because they're seeing
I'm
that this is
sorry.
being
Okay.
no apologies required. But I just want to highlight some of the titles as you've shared: Liberia, the land of promise to free colored men; Liberia's offering being addresses, sermons, etc. The origin and purpose of
Yes.
African colonization discourse; our origin,
Yeah, these are
dangers, and
sermons
duties.
and
Right,
speeches.
exactly. And they would have annual. They were defined as annual addresses, but you can easily go online now and see most of them have been preserved and archived. Right. The in 1869, the Negro in ancient history. In 1871, the people of Africa.
1850, not 1860. Oh,
well, no, you know what, no, don't worry about it. See, this is what I've learned. He gave the sermon earlier when it was published in as a public, yeah, and right, then that's the year that they have it documented as. But you are absolutely correct in terms of when this actual sermon or annual address was delivered. And that's why I'm just saying, so people get clarity on the titles, like the Negro in ancient history, the people of Africa, and notice this was a series of papers that were actually done collaboratively around African people's character, their condition, and future prospects. But he did that with Theodore Dwight, along with Taylor Lewis. And again, these are persons that were not only attached to the church or theological spaces, but these are persons that were doing things globally around this research. He was writing in the 18 and speaking on it in the 1860s, but writing about it in the 1870s from West Africa to Palestine. So this issue with Palestine is not new. So I think people should know that persons as great as Reverend Dr. Edward Wilmot Blyden was already in that space. The aims and methods of a liberal education for Africans, the origin and purpose of African colonization. And again, these were discourses that were ongoing, and in what's defined in 1887 that we can find as a culmination of these publications and these annual addresses: Christianity, Islam, and the Negro race, which is a significant contribution to literature, research, history, social sciences, and much more to really understand what he's
development.
Yeah, exactly. And then, of course, West Africa before Europe, which was written after that, and then African Life and Customs that was written after that. But again, these are coming from annual
1908.
addresses. Yeah, these are coming from annual addresses, and I just felt it's important that people know when you were talking about the colorisms back in the day and the types of discrimination that your great grandfather endured. He has this quote that many people keep. I used to have it memorized, but I like to read these things so that I don't misrepresent things. And I quote, if we are to make an independent nation, a strong nation, We must listen to the songs of our unsophisticated brethren as
That's
they
correct.
sing of their history. And that just goes back, that's a very delicate way of speaking of the colorisms, the internalized the internalized discrimination that wasn't racism because of lack of power, but contributed to the kind of racist behavior that others launched on people of African ancestry. And again, his whole conversation. Because I know that we're going to be short on time, so I want to let you close out your point, share about the bicentenary.
No, I wasn't going to. I was only going to mention that in passing because I assume I'm going to have another opportunity to speak on this. I was going to speak differently on another channel. Let's say we're going to have, and you asked me about that, then I could say that.
Yes.
But where I stopped was actually where I had wanted to stop first. I wanted to say two things. The Negro in ancient history, believe it or not, had such a profound impact on W.E.B. Du Bois because he never knew that Africans had had any civilization whatsoever. He was shocked to know that they had built palaces, that they were kings, that they were doing all these things, had gold. It just blew his mind, and that's how he became a Pan-Africanist. It completely changed him. He moves to Ghana later on, and that's where he dies. But the whole time, as my father would say, I was like, but Blyden, how could I be, aren't I a Negro first? And that whole thing. And then he says, no, you're first an African, and then you're human. And this is just somebody's perception of you. Took him along. So can you imagine? They had ships and boats. Right. He called the first conference. Blyden could not attend. It was in Paris, so he could not go. But one person that went that's interesting, just for your information, is Madam C.J. Walker. Madam C.J. Walker went, applied to go. The American government would not give her a visa. So she ended up in the end, sadly, not going. But what she did do, she opened a school for girls in Togo because Blyden had been talking about how women's education was such an important thing.
Correct.
And he'd been seeking for this. So that's what she built a school in Togo. Another woman who was there, I think she built a school in not Benin, but in another, and not in Liberia. But they sent donations. But C.J. Walker's school was in Togo.
And continues. I mean, and the efforts continued through her foundation in different parts of Africa.
Right. His writings, he would one day would say, well, you're doing all of this. Who's gonna see all of this, Blight? And he would say, they're going to pick it up. Somebody will pick this up, and they'll read it, and then they'll pass it on, and they'll do what is written there. The Caribbean, I come back to the Caribbean one last time because of extremely big importance is the role of from Barbados, because they made up a significant majority. They had a tradition. They had to excel and achieve because that's what Blyden wanted. Is that correct?
That's right.
So each time, whatever profession they would take, they open schools for Muslims, they open schools for Christians, they raise their people to have skills and to go into the interior, just like he wanted. But the most beautiful one is of a man called Romeo Horton, who, to honor that legacy that Blyden had left, like Marcus Garvey started the Back to Africa movement. All of them they had read something, they went and did it. Horton decided to create the first savings bank for Liberia.
That's right.
Firestone was so angry, it almost burned down the road.
That's right.
How dare Liberians want a bank when Firestone had given them the only bank they were supposed to have? So Horton then moves on and creates the first African Development Bank for the independent African nations that took place in the 60s and 70s. Okay? He creates this bank. All is well. They're supposed to put in 40,000 apiece per country so that when they have to develop anything, the African Development Bank was there.
Correct.
But because the new African nations did not want to be attached to their old colonial masters, they didn't want that same exploitation that had taken them so long to get out of it, they decided they were not going to be aligned to any particular European nation. Whoever said development, they would work with them. And so they had this non-alignment movement that started with Nasser in Egypt. You will not believe that by the end of the 70s, all those heads of state that had joined that non-alignment, none of them were alive.
Oh.
They'd all been killed with coups and different things, assassinated. And the Africa Development Bank, therefore, never had a continuity that it was supposed to have. It was taken over by the American banking administrations, so private ones. And the Africa Development Bank is run with the import, export, and everything, but by the United States.
I just hope it's
On the
important.
basis,
I think it's important to
that's
also
important.
yeah, that's very, very important for a variety of reasons. But I like for
Yeah,
as
but
we
one
get ready to
is the Bayesian, yes.
yes, you know,
Yeah.
and I think it's important to know that he was a Bayesian, especially with the republic status that our newest republic in the Caribbean is Barbados under the leadership of Her
Yes.
Excellency Mia Motley, and this type of information and the fact that right now in the last couple of years, developments have been put in place. So, where is the 2020? Where is the African Export Import Bank for Development now in 2025 in Barbados?
Oh, that's very good.
I just think it's
But
very
is it?
important to know that that is what exists now.
I had not read that, but since I'm
Yeah.
going to start my money palaver, I'll make sure that I include that.
Yeah, because I think it's important for persons to also know that the illustrious founder and first president of the Bank of Liberia and, of course, the African Development Bank, A. Romeo Horton, in addition to being from Barbados, I think it's important to know that he too spent significant time around that the various Booker T. Washington Institute. He spent time around the Morehouse College environment.
Yes,
He actually attended there.
And he opened a bank for African Americans in Pennsylvania.
Correct.
That's the third bank he opened.
Correct. And he was also an assistant economic advisor to William Tubman before he was promoted as the first Secretary of Commerce, Industry, and Labor. I just think these are, again, we could spend a lot of time on the historiography and the chronology of how important these persons
I wanted
are.
to show the influence of how when people repatriate to a place, like how you have the Back to Africa diaspora people returning, the character and nature of the diaspora returnees in the 19th century during that second half, not necessarily because of Blyden, but because that's when it was the same zero that they had, the same zero as slaves that they had in the places where they were enslaved. When they came to Liberia, that same zero did not disappear. They had to rise against it. So some of them came and they immediately started businesses because it was critical. Nobody was, they had to make money, and they had to survive.
So
Right?
this is my
So you
question
had-
very quickly because I know that our engineer.
I've finished.
Okay, no.
Okay.
So I want you to have your closing reflection, and then we're going to close out. And we know that we're going to return, get past our technological issues, so that our viewers and listeners can see you. And in the interim, you will send me pictures.
Okay.
Yeah, you'll send me pictures of yourself so that I can put a face to this informative presentation that you shared with us. So please give us your closing word, Sister Isa.
Okay, so so I told you that he went to be ambassador in England. That's where I stopped. I did not mention about his trip to Palestine, but based on that, because I would have been, I would have been having to go back there, this and that and the other. But so to celebrate his birthday, this day, Edward Wilmot Blyden Day, the second publicity that I'm giving is to the publication of the book From West Africa to Palestine this year. The book will be out in October. The reason why is because everybody wants to recognize the state of Palestine. Palestine is a state, independent. And the reason for promoting this, just for your information, is because my great grandfather traveled to a country called Palestine in 1866 because it was there. It had been there for several hundreds of years. It was not a by the way. It went under lots of difficulties. It is true, but he went to a country called Palestine, which is why he entitled the book the way he did. And one of the things that happens when in 1873 he's submitting the manuscript and he's finished it, and he finishes it on Christmas Day in 1873, he writes, "This book will be of tremendous importance 150 years from this date. And in 2023 is when the war broke out in Palestine." For somebody to be that prescient, a 34-year-old man. I mean, it blows your mind because he wasn't psychic, but he was. He was a media person. He loved the media. He loved the publicity. He just loved being a media person. The news, to make sure everybody was informed. It was critical for him.
So with that,
he had more.
with that, I just know because of our extended time taken from us earlier, I want to thank you so much for just joining us, even as audio. And I'm a little bit biased because I can see her on the other device we're speaking on, and you all are unable to see her. But we will correct that in the future. And I hope that the audio provides enough interest so that when we introduce Sister Queen Blyden for our next podcast, after we get through this videography piece of issue, that we can actually take it to the next level. And I want to thank you most humbly for sharing this time as we honor the illustrious, most well respected international Baba of Pan Africanism, African fundamentalism.
Can I just say one thing to the audience so that they'll understand? That this is the Edward Wilmot Blyden Day. Okay, it was proclaimed in the Virgin Islands, but we're trying to promote it in West Africa because West Africa doesn't. We're just doing it now. The objective is to make all of the African Union recognize it as the day for the whole continent. That's the first thing, and that the day celebrates young Pan Africans in the diaspora and in Africa, because the Pan African movement is very large right now, and that's what young people in Africa are clinging to. In the diaspora, they're clinging to it. Governments in West Africa are claiming it as the only way that they can go. That's the beauty of this.
So
thank
blessed.
You so much.
Thank you again. And again, it's been a wonderful way to not just celebrate, but to actually observe, commemorate, and respect the memory of the honorable, most illustrious, well respected, what people say most right honorable Reverend Dr. Edward Wilmot Blyden. And again, you've been listening to Oz Speaks, where we always highlight knowledge, power, and prosperity here on the Crew podcast. Want to thank all of you that were able to tune in, listen, and appreciate and welcome this information. If you have any questions, any input, we'd like to see more of this, you can email us at astspeaks at gmail.com, or link into any of our platforms here on social media. Remember, culture heals humanity, land is our foundation, and spiritual harmony unifies us. And we look forward to you joining us for another podcast. And again, blessed Reverend Dr. Edward Wilmot Blyden Day, August 3rd.
Thank you so much.
It's a joy and a privilege. Yes. We're very pleased. We're very pleased.
And I greet all your audience that I do not see, and I hope that they'll come back for another meeting for some other news part that we're having.
Yes. Of course.
Have a good evening, and God bless you.
Blessings.